Welcome to Book Rising, a podcast by the Radical Books Collective.
Hello, everyone. My name is Gregory Carroll, and I will be a host today on the Book Rising podcast of the Radical Books Collective. This episode is part of a wonderful series called Trailblazing African Feminists. It is my honor and pleasure today to welcome Léonora Miano, joining us from Lomé, I believe. Léonora, welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm surprised. I didn't know I was a trailblazing feminist. That's why I'm stuttering a bit.
Well, we can discuss. So the second volume of your novel, Twilight of Torment, is soon to be released by Seagull Books, an independent press in India who have also published some of your other works. You also edit a provocative series for them titled Quilombola, which we will speak about as well. For those who may not be familiar with your prolific body of work, allow me a few words. You are the author of 16 books, if I counted correctly, winner of such prestigious awards as the Goncourt des Lycéens, Grand Prix littéraire d'Afrique Noire, Prix Femina, Grand Prix du Roman Métis, both of these for Season of the Shadow, which was also translated into English by Seagull Books. You've published novels, but also short story collections written for the stage and published essays as well. Since the publication of your first novel, L'Intérieur de la Nuit, once translated as Dark Heart of the Night in English, you have become an important literary and media figure in Cameroon, where you were born, and in France as well, and around the French-speaking world. I'd like to start at the beginning, so to speak, or maybe one of the beginnings. I know you're sometimes wary of origin stories. You were born in Cameroon and came to France in the 1990s, where you attended university. You published your first novel in 2005. Could you give us a sense of how you grew into becoming an author?
Oh, I don't know if I grew in becoming an author. I started writing when I was 8, and it was never my intention to become an author. I wanted, and I still want to be a singer, actually. I became a writer just because I was full of, how do you call it, neurosis. In French, we say névrose. So it's my inner turmoil that made me a writer. I first started to write to heal myself and to try to remain alive as a sane individual. That's what I did first. So it was never about achieving a career as a writer. It just happened.
That can be quite a lot of space between neuroses and getting published, though. I mean, growing up.
Well, yeah. I can see where you're getting at. Since writing was taking so much a place in my life, I figured that it would acquire meaning only if it was shared. So I had to share it. But in the meantime, I was struggling to become a singer, and I was very serious about it. So I did not rush into signing a contract with a publisher because it wasn't my goal, really. So it took time. I didn't release a first novel until I was 30, more than 30, actually. So that's how it happened.
Did your practice as a singer involve writing lyrics then?
Yes, of course, always.
Do you still sing?
Yes, I do, but I'm not a famous singer. You would know if I were.
So you studied American literature, I believe, in university. You have written and spoken about how much African American, also Black Caribbean authors have inspired you along the way. I notably see a clear echo in the way you explore in your writings, in fiction or otherwise, many elements of that compose the imaginary of the African diaspora, the matter of African origins for Black communities in the Americas and Europe, the issue of belonging for Africans abroad, recurrent topics in your fiction, and of course in your essays. Could you tell us more about how these topics may inform the way you write and also what you write about?
I don't know if I can really answer that, because this is a scholar's view of my work. It's never my intention when I write to do those things, or even to write about those issues. I always think that I am writing a story about family, and then people come and tell me, no, that the story is about colonization, it's about slavery, it's about identity. And well, people are free to read it as they please. So I don't defend myself. But I think that being born in Africa, in post-colonial Africa, in the 70s, in a country that had both French and English as official languages, being bred only in the French language while I was growing up in Africa. There's a lot of all this makes you a rather peculiar individual. And of course, the way you will approach writing or anything creative will certainly have to deal with, even if you do not, even unconsciously, it has to deal with how do we make what do we make of our identities when they're so complex. What am I? Am I more African? What kind of African am I? When I grew up in a a family where everybody spoke only French. What kind of Black person am I? If my imagination blends so many cultures, so many languages, where do I fit in? So even if you don't ask yourself those questions consciously, I assume that they will appear in your work. So in the beginning, I did not really have any intention of producing a political type of novel writing. I think that it happened just because when you are a Black African girl, your existence is political. Your existence is political. What has created your being in the world is so political that you cannot avoid it. So I'm always convinced that I am writing about intimacy, family, but it appears that our intimacies and family stories are, influenced by the broader political history. So, it's just normal that it comes to do you say irrigate in English? Because
Yes,
I
I
speak
believe
a
so.
very beautiful French. I was about to say irriguer,
Yes.
like water like a stream, that comes in to nurture the earth, even unconsciously. So I think that all these topics have appear in our writings, whether we are Africans, Caribbeans, or you know, Black people from the Americas, just because we have such a particular history and we cannot avoid it. It's part of who we are,
Mhm.
just part of who we are.
Yeah, this to me echoes words spoken by Toni Morrison in one of her speeches that became an essay where she mentions, the history of Black writing in the U.S. Implied for a long time sort of avoiding the personal, the emotional, because so much of it was intertwined with politics, right? So even when people were writing in the first person, like say Frederick Douglass, she says there was a very, very dedicated effort at avoiding interiority, so as not to sort of take away from the politics of it. And so she describes her own practice as sort of trying to reverse the thing, while acknowledging, as you just did, that it is also intrinsically political, right? Even the reversal in of
Yes.
itself. Of course, she's talking about a very, as you mentioned, very specific situation, right? For the African American community. Um, how do you feel it compares to you as an African woman who started writing while living in France and writing in French? I mean, there are many comparable aspects as you started talking about. But the position of African writers in France is also very, very different.
Well, I did not start writing in France.
Oh, I mean, publishing. Yes, of course.
I started
Apologies.
publishing in France, but France did not make me, and it
Right.
did not change me a lot. I was smart before I came there. I was even brilliant before I went there. So I stayed myself. I just bettered, just became better with time. But I think that Blackness itself is, a very specific human adventure. And even if it doesn't have the same meaning when you grow up in sub-Saharan Africa, because uh, everyone, the majority being Black, it's not uh, it's not the same as being a minority in the Western world. When you write, it is because you have read. You have read. Most of the time, writing is, um, a form of a sequel of the passion of reading. And what can you read when you're a teenage girl in the 80s growing up in Africa? Well, you don't read a lot of African writers. You read some, of course, through school, but the majority of the literature, the writers you come across are not from Africa, especially if you read in French. So you read about a world that does not know you, that is not so much interested in knowing you. A world, nevertheless, that has a very powerful history with you, but you're not in the books. So I think it shapes the kind of relationship that you will have with the world, even before you travel to Europe. You know that you are not perceived as an equal. You know that people think that are better than you, that they brought you civilization, that you had no culture, you brought nothing to the world before they came and made you human. So you know that even before uh, going to Europe. And the things you know, the things you have experienced, because there are white people in Africa, you know, you see them before you meet them in their own countries, um, and you see the way they behave, you see the way they treat people around them, you see how privileged they are, and how ignorant also. So when you get there, uh, it is just um, another aspect of the Western mentality that is revealed to you, but you already know that your place in the world has to be conquered, that you still have to claim a lot of things that are supposed to be natural. Just because you're a person, those things are supposed to be natural, but they're not for you. So even if you don't think about all those things constantly, they they inhabit every every kind of creative activity that you are willing to embrace. So it's not even a choice. I don't think we sit around and decide that we want to write a love story between two Africans because the world has never seen such a story, and it will become so political. It will be political anyway because such things are not even allowed to you. So when I write about family intimacy, I do that because these are very classic matters for any writer in the world. They just become different because I'm African and because of the way that Africa is viewed. You know, uh, African lovemaking is never just lovemaking. An African family is never just a family. So we know that. Well, what are we supposed to do? Uh, I think it's important to write about what is um, emotional, personal, because it is the part of ourselves that was, in a way, robbed from us. You know, when you're colonized, or enslaved, uh, you become just a body, and not a body that feels, a body that is supposed to work, a tool. You're a tool. So if we want to retrieve our humanity, it's important to work on the inner life of the being. And that's what I do. And that's what writers do all over the world. So, but it just becomes so specific because it's us. And because until today, Africa is not totally free. Africa has not been restored to her place in the world. So, especially French-speaking Africa. And so, everything we do is very political because of all that. But we're just, plain human beings.
So brings me to a related question. So that literature is political, as you pointed out, doesn't necessarily means that writing is politics, right? I mean, those can be very everything, right? And correct me if I'm wrong, but in interventions on TV and some of your writing, I sense, if not wariness, at least some skepticism for mass movements, right? And in some cases, you've spoken about this. There's much about, I'm thinking, for example, maybe in particular of the short story Afropean Soul that really stages this sort
Oh,
of
you've read it. You've read
yeah.
it.
The sort of and well, we don't have to talk about the movement, who I think you very clearly describe in this story, but it stages sort of a contrast between an individual soul searching and the potential problems with mass movements, right? I mean, at least at some level. And yet it's really hard to do politics without groups. And so I'm just curious if you see your writing featuring in, or how you might feature on the politics side of things as opposed to being political, or if or maybe you don't see that as something you should be thinking about at all as an author.
You mean my fiction writing or the essays?
Either one or both.
Well, it's not even my choice.
Mm-hmm.
And, a lot of people read my work, and a lot of activists read my work, and it's good. When you write, you do it alone. You do it on your own, and you spend many hours writing on your own, and it's just very rewarding that people, um, recognize themselves so powerfully in your work that they appropriate it to use it in their political, movements or actions. Uh, I would never complain about that, but it's not my call to say that the work has to become, well, what people will make of it. It's not my call to say. I'm just here to write. Uh, but returning to that particular short story in the um, collection, the Afropean Soul collection, the main character in that story is a peculiar character that one will encounter a couple of times in my work. And he's a person who is afraid of the community, of the group. He has never known that. Uh, and actually, you find him again in Twilight of Torment 2. It's Amok.
Mm-hmm.
So it's that particular character who has a problem with joining the others and who is always very skeptical about uh, about the group, about politics, about revolution, but he does not embody uh, each and every character in my. I have I have I have activists as well. I have many a very wide range of sensitivities, of political sensitivities in my books. So people should read to see what I'm talking about. My characters often disagree. So,
Right.
and Mark very often disagrees with, the more revolutionary brand of the community. But I love both. I love both the skeptical and the revolutionary. I understand them both. Uh, I know why they're so different, why they feel the way they do, and it's my job as a writer to put them together in a story so we can reflect on our differences and think about the way even even we even when we feel so different, the necessity in many ways to come together or at least not to sabotage each other.
So this is related, and it goes to the original question you asked me when you made the difference between fiction and nonfiction. You use both in fiction, so with Afropean soul, and also in your nonfiction this term. So Afropean, so which you've defined in in that short story, for example, as European of African descent. Something
Yeah.
you do not identify with yourself, being Cameroonian, obviously. The term itself and the ways you can employ it, to me, obviously echo the famous opening line of Paul Gilroy's Black Atlantic. I'm quoting, striving to be both European and Black requires some specific forms of double consciousness. And he goes on to treat many topics that are clearly of interest to you as well. In Afropéa, Utopie post-occidentale et post-raciste, you rather provocatively called for to say goodbye to the Black race, to dream to no longer carry colonial history and go beyond it. And I'm translating. I'd be curious to hear more about this because, I should identify as Afropean, I have a Caribbean, I grew up and was born in France, I have a Caribbean family. And I guess, the idea of no longer carrying colonial history sort of, puzzles me, right? Because, I'm also still expected to carry everything else in French history. So, so why is that the part
Well,
that we should get beyond?
well, it's not about getting rid of our history. We can't do that. But and of course, I know that especially in the younger generation, I will not make a lot of friends saying that we should get rid of the Black race. But still, try to hear me out, even if you don't agree. Uh, you know, before anybody came to Africa and called us blacks, it was nobody's definition of self, and for a very simple reason, is that even in Africa, uh, purity is white, the spirit is white. When you and dirt is black. Danger is black. A lot of things negative, even in our native languages in Africa. If we still master those languages, we'll see very easily that what is black is, in a way, universally negative. And there's no way that our ancestors would have themselves decided to locate their identities, sense of self, humanity in that word. When it was coined to name us, it was not only because of the color of our skin. It was in order to give us a place in the world, give us a place in that ladder of human races, and we're at the bottom. And beyond that, I think it's very important to name yourself and not to struggle to inhabit a negative designation that was forced upon you and your ancestors just to, to lower you at the maximum, you know? So, getting rid of the Black race uh, does not mean that we could erase uh, the pain, the history of pain, the struggle, that we could erase the uh, powerful ability that people of African descent had in the Caribbean or the Americas generally to reinvent Africa where they were, to create new cultures, spiritualities that were not there before. Uh, it is not to negate all that. It is just to remind us that, in fact, all the struggle has been to um, how to put it nicely, to claim precisely what was um, uh, même en français, je trouve pas le mot. What was denied? What was denied? What was this denied us by the name Black? What was it? What was it? And uh, uh, for people who speak French, French-speaking people, it's very easy to understand what I'm saying because French is the only language in the world that puts a racial um, 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 designation to the slave trade. When you name it in French, it is not the slave trade. The slaves are blacks and they're only black. And it's for a reason. It's for a reason. So, I would be so happy if we were able to, not only create our own designations, but to impose those designations to the world and not try to give a form of beauty to something that will remain both an insult and an injury. Because while for us, Black may mean something, for the world, the word will still convey the same negative meanings it's always had. So it was just about that. But who am I? I'm not here to compel you if you can't. I'm just offering a way out and offering you know, um, I'm very much about reclaiming our power. I'm very much about that. That's my goal in life, the power. And reclaiming our power for me is also a matter of how we name ourselves. And even Afropia and Afropean is not totally a word that comes from us. That comes from the people who use it. And for me, it's really a problem. Is it because I'm a writer that I'm so focused on the word, on the naming? I don't think so. I think that he who has the power to name controls you. We spoke about Africa a while ago. Africa was named from outside. It was, the countries were formed. The countries as we know them today were formed from outside. The names we bear, our country's names, even sometimes the tribal names that we have were created abroad. And you can see how the fact that, in a way, you do not own your own reality. You can see the chaos that we're in since, it's been a few centuries now. And for me, I think that naming, reclaiming, and to have authority on the way people will call you is very important. It is very important. And they know it. And the West,
This,
they know it.
this,
Everybody does.
yeah, this really
Everybody
makes me
does.
think of something that's at the intersection of our previous conversation and my next question. So I'm going to try to package this nicely. The point you made about the way the French called, traite négrière, to me is interesting because, of course, that was the official term.
Traite négrière or traite des Noirs,
Right.
which is even more clearer. Traite des Noirs is, in broad daylight.
Yeah, but historically, it's an interesting thing. So I work on the Haitian Revolution a lot, and one thing that happens, around the first constitution of Haiti is, of course, when the article that declares all Haitians black, and they say they use the term noir by express opposition to nègre, which has become again the official term for under Napoleon. Right during the French Revolution, they moved to using noir instead of nègre to make the distinction between the term that is nègre at the time, which is equivalent to slave, and noir, which would be not an insult, at least for a minute there. And that is the term that the Haitian Constitution uses in French, right? And so we get back to the point you were making, which is that it's a language that.
It's only the African, the Asian Revolution, and I don't know if you speak Asian Creole, but in Asian Creole, nègre is not nègre.
Right. Yeah.
It means human being.
Mm-hmm.
So they have been revolutionary in every way, in every way. Mm-hmm. And if you read that constitution closely, you're made to understand that they have, in fact, stripped the word black of its colonial meaning, mm-hmm. since it now applies to people who are not black.
Right, exactly.
Yes, but it's very unique. It's very unique. Yes, it's very unique. And mm-hmm. Now tell me, what is the intellectual power of Haiti today to impose that view on the world?
Well, I personally like to think that it did inspire much of what we're talking about right now, actually. I mean, when we talk about Black pride and Black power and things, again, that are not necessarily universally
very few people know about that.
Sure.
Know about that aspect of the mm-hmm. Asian Revolution, and it really, you can't tell me that it has an impact on the way that Black people are viewed in the Arab world, for instance, or in China or in India. Mm-hmm. But the way that they are perceived in the Western world has an impact, because it is the West that colonized everyone, and left its mark on everybody's worldview in a way, no matter what people say. Every banker in the world wears a Western suit with no question, with very few exceptions. So let's, let's not fool ourselves. Yeah.
I mean, I think, to me, it connects to something you started talking about. You mentioned, a linguistic and aspect of things and languages. And of course, Cameroon was once colonized by France, gained independence in a war that most French people have never heard about, for that matter, which is another, when we talk about history and the way it does, survive or not. Part of the country used to be under English colonial mandate, and these linguistic differences certainly resonate to this day, notably in the so-called Anglophone crisis, for example, if only the name of it. Your novels, and that's very clear in their translation at Siegel as well, that contain short glossaries, right? I'm thinking about the ones accounting for Cam Franglais, which you define as Cameroonian Pidgin at the crossroads of indigenous languages and colonial languages. I saw a similar attention to languages in Season of the Shadow, also at Siegel. And in that novel, just quickly to use one small example, as we see characters moving closer from the interior to the coast, they encounter new linguistic communities from Africa, but also abroad, of course. And there's really close attention constantly in your writing to this issue of languages and how they may impact, the way people express themselves, communicate, of course, but also think, we just were talking about. I'm just curious maybe can you tell us a bit more what you mean to convey with this attention to a variety of languages? I'm sure this means something to you as a person, as a writer, as it may for a lot of people. Then again, when we speak of France, we speak of a country where a lot of people only speak one language. So this sort
Yes,
of
it's starting to change. Oh, it's starting to change. The French are evolving. And well, I think my attention to language um, comes from the fact that when I was little, I was, surrounded by people who only spoke French to me, even my grandparents. But when they spoke together and they didn't want me to understand, they used what was supposed to have been my mother tongue, my ancestral language. And I eventually learned it on my own because I wanted to know what those conversations that excluded me were about. And when you speak various languages, you are made to acknowledge that languages are not just different because of the way they sound. Um, and they're not just useful because they help you communicate with a lot of people. Uh, each language carries a worldview. For example, in France, there's you know uh, there's a form of controversy these days about uh, gender in language. And it appears that for a lot of activists, feminists, uh, the French language as it is used, as it has been used until now, say maybe 2 centuries now, is a diminishes the importance of the feminine, thus the importance of women. But such a problem does not exist in many African languages because there's no gender. And if there's no gender in those languages, it's not because the languages don't know that there's a feminine sensitivity, that women exist. Not at all. It is just because they view the world very differently. So if we lose those languages, if they are erased, if they vanished, if they vanish, if they disappear, it is a way to understand human life that is no more available. And I think that the idea of languages with no gender should be so precious today with all our questions around sexual identity, gender, you know. It's important to know that people have had a very different perception of all those things while not erasing the masculine or the feminine. In most African languages, for example, a table will have no gender, but he has in French. He does. Table is feminine in French. A child in many African languages, when you just say child, there's no gender. You have to say boy or girl in order to, make a difference. So languages are important for the way they help us to think differently and, to broaden our own ability to understand things and to share the world with others. So yes, for me, it's a very important matter. Maybe because also I come from a region of the world where local languages are threatened. A lot of African languages are about to disappear in the years to come because, they're not in use because they have no political importance or power. And it also means that in the way that the many African identities will express themselves in the future, there will remain very little of what was before, what used to be before we were colonized and called Black, African, and so on. So yes, for me, it's important, very important.
Yeah, it makes me think of, other places where I've seen you engage with the term and the idea of francophonie, which is perpetually, tends to be really weird outside of the francophone circles, like in the US.
It is.
Very, very, a very, very, essentially colonial rapport to language and to writing. It's funny because, I was recently teaching a course in American literature and discussing, how and when American scholars and writers started saying, well, our literature in English is not English literature, right? Like we're separate. We write in a somewhat similar language, but this is ours, and we have we're not England, right? Something that again, francophonie sort of constantly appears to want to negate. And you've spoken of Afrophonie, and I'm wondering to what extent you related to what we were just talking about, and also again this effort, like in your novels, to sort of include might not be the term, but to show, right, like African languages, African terminology, And also those contact languages, right? Comme franglais in texts that otherwise are celebrated as, francophone novels. So, yeah, I'm just curious if you could maybe say a little more about what you mean by Afrophonie by contrast to francophonie.
Afrophonie spoke about not the language we are made to speak per se, but it was the idea that we are able to use that language in order to reach and engage in conversations with other people of African descent, and that the conversations should be not about our languages, but the content of the discourse that we want to, um, have between us, and have the world hear about us. So if I am a French-speaking person and I'm interested in, talking with people of African descent who speak English or Portuguese or, any other language, what is really important for me is that we create a space where our conversations are rendered possible or made possible. I don't think we'll have too much difficulty to learn the other's language or to translate if necessary, just in order to make the conversation happen. That's what for me is important. How can we use those languages that were forced on us? How can we use them at our benefits? That's the only thing that I'm interested in. And the relationship, the very special relationship that France has to what she still thinks is her language, her possession, it should not concern us. That's not our problem. That's not our problem. When we were born in our various countries in sub-Saharan Africa, those languages were there, already in use, and it would be foolish not to keep them and to use it at our benefit, while at the same time doing the best we can to salvage the local languages that are very threatened these days, and even more so in the years to come. So for me, it's about how are we able, using those languages, how are we able to connect and to relocate the centers of power as far as our experiences are concerned, and as far as our goals for the future also are concerned. And knowing some English, because now my spoken English has weakened a lot because I've been corrupted by the French. I stayed
What they do.
in France for too long. But being able to hold a conversation in some English allows me to connect with people in India, Australia, a lot of places in the world. So, I do not at all resent the English for spreading their language all around the world. And, English being a very successful colonial language, it also damages the language itself in various ways because we use it as we please with our accents, with our vocabulary sometimes, and which we should just feel free and comfortable about the language issue. It will be what we make of it. That's what I think.
So we're celebrating the translation of your novels in English at Seagull. And so I'm curious, does that mean we'll see you on American shores pretty soon? And also I'm curious what you're working on right now that may or may not also.
Well, the first part of your question depends on whoever wants to invite me. I will come gladly. And what will you read? Shortly, an essay on whiteness, because I think that the real problem in the world today is whiteness. So I had to I had to write my piece on whiteness, and it's being released in October, early October in France. So I'll be there to ask questions about whiteness, because I think that to be serious for 1 minute, Black people, we have reflected so much on Blackness. We've written so much. The missing part of the conversation now is whiteness. And the white folks, especially in Europe, and particularly in France, do not want to engage that conversation. They don't even want to be labeled as white. So I think that for the years to come, the decades to come, that's the conversation that we should have. And for Africans and people of African descent, it's important also because, as I said before, that I was very much interested in power. It gives us more power to express ourselves on history, politics, and not from the standpoint of the victim. We also allow ourselves to give you a name and to explain to you what is the meaning of that name and what is your place in the world if you bear that name. It's very important because those who do not want to be perceived as whites when they are, and it's not our making, it is because they know that once you enter a racial category, I'm talking especially about Europe here, they know that when you enter a racial category, you are no more, and how to say it, you are no more a universal creature. You are like the others, something specific and something limited. And of course, it is not very appealing. That's also the reason why I wanted us to get rid of the Black race, because it's specific, limited, unappealing, even for us. It robs you of an enormous amount of power. to be just in that little box when you were something so huge before you were reduced to what is now called blackness. And it's the same thing with white people. If we think about it closely, it's a that new essay is it's the beginning of something that will have to be. I will come to grips with that in the years to come. It has to. It has to take time. It has to be creusé. How do you say creusé? Because I know you can speak French, Gregory. So,
Yes, I do. All right,
and when I
Leonora,
know
I
people speak French, it's difficult to speak English. Makes it
I'll try to go
difficult.
back and I'll try to translate myself. So thank you very much for this conversation for Book Rising, the podcast. It was a pleasure to speak to you. I am told we're about out of time. So thank
Oh,
you.
okay.
Yeah, that's what I see.
Thank you
That's
for
what
having me again.
I'm
And
saying.
I
Well,
hope
thanks for coming. And yeah, I hope we'll see you on this side of the ocean pretty soon.
very easy, invite me. Ben, merci encore de cette
Et de
invitation.
rien, c'était
À
Miano.
bientôt. À bientôt.